Hello and welcome to your programme Q&A webinar. This webinar will cover the MSc Chemical Biology and the MSc Stem Cell Engineering for Regenerative Medicine. We're joined by our programme leads and they are hopefully going to answer any questions you have about the programmes. And don't worry if you think of any questions afterwards. We do have the administration email addresses on the programme web pages, so if you think of anything, do get in touch. The teams are brilliant. And we are recording the session, so you'll have a copy of it in the next few days. So Catherine, would you like to kick us off and introduce yourself, and then we'll pass to Brian?
Sure. So I'm Catherine Berry, and I run the Stem Cell Engineering for Regenerative Medicine Master's Programme. So do you want me to talk a little bit about the content, Naomi? Or yeah, sure. So the programme itself is a top programme divided into 3 separate semesters. And in the first semester, 60 credits, 60 credits second semester, and the third semester is a research project, a wet project in the lab working with us for 60 credits as well. And in the first semester, we get you started quite quickly with molecular research skills. And this is to bring you up to date with some of the kind of techniques you can use in the lab, such as PCR, excuse me. You'll also have a couple of consecutive courses running, core courses, Biophysics for Cell and Systems, which introduces you to a bit about the concepts of biophysics, and also biomaterials and immune regulation. And then I also run a course as well, which will be Stem Cell Science and Engineering, Microenvironments for Regenerative Medicine. And those 4 courses are all run in semester 1, and they are all in person, and they're all on campus. And you'll meet a lot of the team who you will be working with in the final project in semester 3 during there. Semester 2 has 2 core courses, which are scaffolds and tissues, which will introduce you to the concepts of using 3D scaffolds to grow cells in, different types of scaffolds, and also design a research project, which will lead you in at the end of the semester towards your research project. And we also have a 10 credit and a 20 credit optional course that you can do. And the final semester will be your research project, where you'll be working with us in the lab.
Perfect. And Brian, would you like to tell us about yourself and the programme?
Hi, sorry about the background noise. I'm in the NMR lab at the moment. I'm programme lead along with Professor Richard Hartley from the School of Chemistry for our programme in chemical biology. So the programme, and I'm a senior lecturer in biomolecular NMR. Our programme is split equally between chemistry and life sciences courses. So in the 60 credits, in the life sciences courses, you do some molecular biology, recombinant protein expression, and then some biophysics experiments, looking at particularly fluorescence and NMR spectroscopy and other spectroscopies used as probes of biological function and structure. And in the chemistry side of things, then there's a strong focus on organic chemistry, building on the skills that you may have from your undergraduate programs, to really allow you to understand and to be expert in the world of building chemical tools for doing biological research. And as in common with all our MSc programs here, then on successful completion of the talk part of the course, which runs over the first 2 semesters up until about Easter time, May time, in fact, then you pursue a research project in one of our research labs and get some experience of applying what you've learned during the course in a real research setting.
Perfect. And we're always asked about that research project element because it is such a large part of the MSc programmes. Could you tell us a bit about how the process works for each of the programmes? So when do students choose their topic? When does all that happen?
Do you want to go first, Catherine?
Yeah, sure, me as well. So that's actually happening just now. So February, March time is when the list of projects get released to students. So for the current cohort we've got now, their student projects have just been released last week. And they're usually given a week to 10 days to consider the options, and then they select their top 5 favourites from the list of projects, and then they will get allocated. So far, we've always managed to give the first or second choice. So it's rare that you don't get your first or second choice. But occasionally you may, if one's super popular, get a third choice. But regardless of which, you will end up working in the lab with a supervisor, an academic supervisor, and a postdoc or PhD student closely on a daily basis. And the projects themselves are 11 weeks. The first week is training. So all of you are in together, and we work with the technical team, and we get you training to get used to working in our labs. So a bit of cell culture, a bit of getting familiar with all the tools within the lab. And then after that first week, after you've been inducted properly into the lab, you then start your research project. And the way it works is before you come into the lab, you will do a 20 credit course in semester 2 called Design a Research Project. And during that, you'll learn about how to, there's 2 weeks of lectures and seminars, teaching you how to design a research project, essentially, how you write the different aspects, how it comes together. And then in that time, you will meet your academic supervisor and your lab supervisor, and they will have 2 or 3 meetings with you and go through all the different aspects. So by the time you come to start your project, you'll have done a lot of reading on the subject, you'll have been into the lab, you'll have met your supervisors. So it's a good start-off point for you to just get started. So those 10 weeks in the lab are valuable, so you are going straight in and working straight away.
Great. And is that similar for the MSc Chemical Biology, Brian?
Yeah, very similar situation. So we release projects that are available around about now, and students select amongst a number of their preferences, and then we allocate people. And again, in the whole time we've been running this program, only one student has not got a project of their choice. And I think the thing to emphasize, as Catherine's already made clear, is that these are not just made up projects just to keep you busy. These are genuine research projects. So you join a research group, your research is making a real contribution to science, and you're learning how to apply your knowledge in a genuine research context.
Great. And Catherine, we've had a question submitted beforehand asking about the optional courses and when students choose those. Are they expected to choose them when they register, or do they get some time?
No, you get plenty time. So you start off in semester 1, getting relocated, settled in, bedded into the program. You meet me, you meet everybody on your classmates, and then you start your courses. The options come out in semester 1, but later on, halfway through. So I will already have spoken to you about the different options that you have, the different 10 credit ones and 20 credit options that you've got. And then they get released, and you will have a session, an afternoon session, where the course lead from each option will introduce themselves and introduce the options. So you'll understand what it is, what it's about, what the assessments are, and what the topic is in general. So you can make a sort of informed decision. And then you make your selections towards the end of semester 1, and then you're allocated and your timetables put in place for semester 2.
Perfect. And I know that this is a really difficult question to answer because it'll vary week on week. It'll depend what options you choose, for especially stem cell. But how often should students expect to be on campus in class?
All the time. Everything is on campus, and everything's in person in class. There's one of the options which is cancer, microenvironment and biomarkers, and that is one on campus, but a slightly different part of our campus. So yeah, you get to know a bit more of the campus if you take that option. But yeah, everything is in person. I'm sure you're the same, Brian.
Yeah, I think in terms of the timetable, it's quite variable because these are master's level courses. Some of them are taught in kind of regular weekly slots. Some of them are very concentrated, with a couple of weeks of lectures followed by a practical and so on. So the timetable is quite variable, but essentially students should expect to be here on campus for most of their time, essentially. Although of course that will vary, and the expectation is that for every credit of one of our courses, that there's probably an hour or two's contact time with staff, and expected at least 6 hours of self-study.
Yeah, it's a lot. I think some students don't appreciate quite how much is expected of them out with those class times. And what sort of assessments should students expect throughout their MSc? Is there a variety, or is it quite similar things that they'll do?
Yeah, so there's a variety. So we try and cover everything because students are good at different things. So there's written assignments such as essays and lab reports. There's presentations in terms of doing a poster presentation as you would in a scientific conference. There's also presentations in terms of using PowerPoint to just talk to groups of people. And there's also 2 exam components as well for the engineering aspects, which are sit-down in-person exams, which are normal timed exams on campus. And obviously, you'll also have things like during your third semester project, there's 3 different types of assessment there. There's a supervisor report, which is how you behave in the lab. So that's something that is your day-to-day behavior. There's the project write-up, and there's also a presentation. So we try and cover everything: written, exams, presenting. So students get a chance to get examined in many different ways.
Yeah, I think that an important thing to realize is that we treat assessment as preparation for the world of work. And in the scientific context, that means being able to read and write papers and scientific reports, being able to present stuff well at conferences and so on. So most of our assessments are designed not just around testing your knowledge and how you've engaged with the course, but also to give you training in how you can then make use of in your future career. And similar situation in terms of a mixture of presentations, both verbal, oral ones, and posters, together with lab reports. So we put a lot of emphasis on getting you to write lab reports in the style of a scientific paper, for the reasons I've already explained. And then in the chemists, like the engineers in the stem cell program, the chemists in our program are quite fond still of putting you in an exam hall and testing your knowledge in an exam setting. So there are exams, hour-long exams for each of the chemistry component courses.
Perfect. And I think you've kind of touched on this, but what sort of backgrounds do your students typically come from? What sort of undergraduate degrees have they done in the past?
Yeah, so for the one that we run, the stem cell one, there's a variety. Some bioengineering students, there's some medic students and some dentists who are interested in regenerative medicine for obvious reasons. And there's also straightforward biological sciences as well. So we've had a couple of students who, we usually look at the student's background and look at their CV and understand what their transcript was in their previous degree to see what kind of knowledge and background they've got to make sure this is applicable for them as well as enjoyable for them. We don't want to have something that's hugely challenging that doesn't suit their background, but something that will enhance what their interests already are. So we do have straightforward biological sciences as well. We've had pharmaceutical sciences occasionally, looking at diverting into regenerative medicine rather than going down the chemical route for pharmacology. So a kind of wide variety of backgrounds, really.
So for chemical biology, we're a little narrower in what we think will prepare you well for our program. So we take students from either a molecular life science background, so biochemistry, molecular cell biology, pharmacology possibly. But if your undergraduate degree is very general biology, if it's mainly organismal biology, then that probably won't give you enough preparation. Whereas if you've done one of those molecular life sciences, you'll understand the molecular world well enough that you probably have a little bit of chemistry undergraduate experience as well. Similarly, we take a lot of students who have chemistry first degrees who have got an interest in advancing that into their life sciences knowledge. So the only thing that we tend to be a bit strict about is, so people who come from a chemical engineering background, it depends very much on how much chemistry content there is in your undergraduate course. If it's very engineering focused, then you're probably not well prepared for making that transition to sort of high level organic chemistry plus the life sciences stuff which you won't be familiar with. But if you have a strong organic chemistry background in your undergraduate degree, then do highlight that in your application, because then we can make an exception.
Great. I'm really curious what's going on in the background of your screen, Brian.
Well, I'm here in the NMR lab, so there are lots of NMR spectrometers around me, which are loading samples and taking them out again. So that's all the hissing and stuff is just the robotics that are moving the samples in and out of the magnets.
Sounds very cool. And in terms of preparing for their studies in September, is there anything that a student can do to really set themselves up well to get started?
I can answer that. So for chemical biology, then well, there's a general thing which would be good for any of our courses. So obviously our courses are taught and assessed in English, and so if English is not your first language, then the level of English that we expect is that you're going to need to achieve in order to do well is maybe a little higher than the entry requirements are. So working on your English language skills while you have the leisure to do so is always a good idea. Reading some stuff, maybe not some science, but some other stuff, engaging with some British culture so that you understand idiomatic English when you get here, and you're not relying on Google Translate to get you through. And on the sort of course content side of things, for our applicants or our intake, then if you come from the life sciences thing and your organic chemistry is maybe a little bit shaky, go and dig out your undergraduate organic chemistry book and remind yourself a bit of that. If you're coming from the chemistry side, have a read about some molecular life sciences stuff. Look at and make sure your spectroscopy is up to scratch.
Yeah, that's good advice. I'd echo the English language because certainly, I think a basic level of English is absolutely fine, and I think you'll get by with that. But I think a lot of the lecturers are international as well. We all have very different accents. We all have very different ways of expressing ourselves. So sometimes being able to kind of follow that is important. So when you come here, like Brian says, just get involved, go around, have a look, talk to people, become familiar with kind of colloquial English and how people talk and how people express themselves. And in terms of the science, I think get yourself engaged quickly with your cohort. We try and have a small cohort, and each year it's a joy to see people from different backgrounds, different countries, different languages all coming together, and they usually make a really tight cohort. And by the end of the first semester, you know your classmates well, and they're the ones that will support you all the way through. So it's always really nice. I always find a lot of happiness in seeing how well the cohort pulls together. So just make sure when you come here, you may come with a cohort of students from your home country. That's great. And you may end up living with them. That's great. But try to get engaged with your class, different people, different backgrounds. They're the ones that will go through your course program with you all the way to the end. And it's a really good support to have that.
Yeah.
And I think have a look also at Moodle and the platforms on Glasgow University websites. We use Moodle to kind of launch all our courses. So become familiar with that. So it's not a bit, a bit shocking or a bit confusing, I should say. Every course is organized slightly differently on Moodle, so that can be a little bit confusing for people. They're not mirror templates of each course. So just become familiar with using all the tools within Glasgow University. Get on campus, have a look around, get to the library, get to know where all the buildings are before your timetable starts. Things like that.
I think that's really good advice, and there's loads of opportunities for our students, and it comes down to yourself, doesn't it? You need to get involved. They're there. You just need to take those opportunities. And in terms of after graduation, what sort of careers do our students go on to do?
So our program's been running since 2020. So we don't yet have any CEOs of international companies, as far as I know. So a reasonable proportion of our students go on to further study as a PhD student. So our MSc is good preparation for moving into the world as a PhD student. Other graduates have gone on into other research positions in companies, or are using their skills in a non-science setting. So it's a wide variety of careers, but particularly focused, as we intended, on pharmaceutical companies, biotech companies, chemical biology applications.
And likewise, we're very similar. So a lot of our students, I always get them to a little questionnaire when they first get here, because I'm curious about why they want to do a master's. So I just 5 little questions, just asking what their background is, why Glasgow, why this program, and then what they want to get out of it. And it's funny, usually it's a kind of split between they want to do further education and PhDs or want to go into industry. And sometimes it's quite nice at the end of the program where they look at those again and quite often they've changed their mind. So, I mean, maybe I'm a little bit biased. I do tend to sell the PhD life as being, you know, I'm an academic, I enjoy it. So I do tend to be enthusiastic about that. But certainly there's some people who weren't interested in industry who become more interested, and vice versa. Some students who, they tend to think of a PhD as being something that's, you know, quite hard. You know, the masters will prepare you well for a PhD application. So we get a mix. Again, my program's been running since 2019, so not much longer, 1 year longer than Brian's. And yeah, typically the exit, people go into PhDs, biological industry or medical research in different ways.
Lots of opportunities then. We've covered most of the questions that we typically get asked, as well as those that have been covered beforehand. Just with the last little bit of time we've got, I don't know if there's anything that you feel we've not touched on or that you'd like to expand on, or if you're quite happy. I mean, there's been a lot of information shared on 2 programs there, but just if you have anything. Well, good. Perfect. Perfect. Well, I think that's a nice place to wrap up. Like we said, if you do have any further questions, please do get in touch with the administration email addresses that are on our programme web pages. And yeah, thanks very much to Catherine and Brian for taking time out of your busy days. And hopefully we'll see you all come September time. Thank you. Bye-bye.